There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from the absence of sound, but from the disappearance of meaning. It's the silence after a loss, after a door closes, after the light goes out and doesn't come back. You don't scream. You don't run. You just float, not in peace, but in some kind of gravity that feels ancient, unseen, irresistible. Some call it grief. Some call it depression. Some call it surrender. But Tesla, he called it something else, a portal. In this episode, we'll step into the dark space most people try to avoid, not to escape it, but to understand what it's asking of us. We'll explore the science of black holes, yes, but more than that, we'll listen to their message. We'll see how Tesla viewed them, not as cosmic threats, but as spiritual mirrors. And we'll walk with him to the edge of the unknown, where light disappears, only to return in a different form. I remember a night, standing alone under a sky so dark, it felt like space had forgotten how to glow. The stars were gone clouded, the streetlights far behind me, and in that moment, I felt like I was falling inward into a place where even my name didn't follow. It wasn't frightening, but it wasn't safe either. It felt like being swallowed by something that didn't hate me, but didn't explain itself. That was the first time I understood what a black hole might feel like, not to a telescope, but to a soul. And it wouldn't be the last. Maybe you've felt it, too, not out there in the sky, but in your own life. A moment when something collapsed, when nothing made sense anymore. And yet, somewhere in that stillness, a doorway began to form. You didn't call it a black hole, but it pulled you in just the same. Tonight, we're going to walk into that space together, slowly, gently, not to find an answer, but to remember what Tesla tried to tell us all along, that the universe doesn't fear darkness, because darkness is where the light begins again. Why are we so drawn to something that swallows even light, something so final, so silent, so complete? We look up at the stars, we build telescopes, we send out signals across the void, but it's the blackness that holds us longest, that keeps us staring, that won't let us turn away. Maybe it's because, deep down, we see something of ourselves in it, not the surface self, not the one that smiles and answers emails, but the self that wonders, quietly, what happens when all this ends? Because black holes are not just out there, they're metaphors that live inside us. They are the moments when something we built collapses, a dream, a belief, a person we loved, and we are left standing with the pieces, with the silence, with the question, what now? There was a time, not so long ago, when I felt like I was being pulled inward, into a grief so dense it distorted my sense of time. I didn't eat, didn't speak, just existed, like matter, circling an invisible center. Everything I thought I knew about who I was, what I believed, why I even mattered, fell apart. At first, I thought I was dying, not physically, but emotionally, spiritually, as if my light had been taken. But something strange happened. When I stopped resisting, when I let go, when I stopped trying to climb out, I fell through. And what I found was not destruction, but stillness. And in that stillness, something began to reassemble, not as it was, but as it was meant to be. You see, the collapse was calling me, not to end me, but to show me what was waiting, beyond the shape I used to be. And maybe that's why we're drawn to black holes, because we know, on some deep unspoken level, that the most sacred transformations don't begin with light. They begin with loss, the loss of who we were, the loss of certainty, the loss of control. But beneath that loss is something older than fear, older than pain, an invitation to dissolve and return to everything we forgot we were. The physicists call it a singularity. The mystics call it ego death. Tesla called it a doorway. So let's walk toward it. Let's look closer at the science of the black hole, but not just to understand space, to understand ourselves, because the next truth is this: sometimes the universe hides its most sacred truths in the places we're most afraid to look, and black holes might just be the mirror that shows us who we really are. When all the light has been stripped away, we live in a world built on observation, on formulas, proof, and repeatable data. We measure distance in kilometers, mass in kilograms, and light in nanometers. And for most things, that's enough. But black holes, they don't play by those rules. Science sees them as cosmic anomalies, born from the collapse of massive stars. Their gravitational pull becomes so strong, not even light can escape. Einstein's equations predicted them, but even he doubted they could exist. And yet, they do. We've seen the shadows, heard the echoes of their hunger across the fabric of space. In 2019, we even photographed the edge of one, that burning halo around the nothing, the event horizon. That image stunned the world. A ring of fire around a mouth of silence. Science called it a success, proof of theory, confirmation of relativistic predictions. But even then, we were only seeing the outline, the edge, not the truth inside, because what happens beyond that line still lies beyond reach, not just of instruments, but of understanding. Inside a black hole, time bends, space collapses, reality as we know it dissolves. And at the center is something we don't dare name with confidence: a singularity, infinite density, no volume, all mass. It's the end of equations, the point where physics breaks, where all the rules unravel and the numbers fall silent. And that's exactly where the mystery begins. Because if we can't measure it, can't see it, can't define it, then maybe the black hole isn't just a scientific puzzle. Maybe it's a spiritual metaphor that science is not yet delicate enough to hear. Tesla sensed this. He stood at the edge of science and felt what equations could not express. He didn't just observe the distortion of light, he felt the meaning behind it. He spoke of a moment during an experiment in Colorado when the light simply disappeared. It didn't scatter, didn't reflect. It was pulled into an invisible point in space, gone without a trace. To him, it wasn't collapse. It was a return. He didn't need a name for it. He didn't even try to fight it. He just said, "I didn't see the end. I saw a doorway." This is the gap between what science sees and what the soul understands. Science defines black holes in terms of gravity, spin, entropy. It can tell us how they're born and what they do to nearby stars, but it cannot tell us what it means to be inside one. It cannot describe the sensation of having everything you are pulled inward into a silence that both frightens and frees you. It cannot describe what it feels like to reach the end of form and discover that consciousness still remembers itself. But perhaps black holes are the universe's way of reminding us that not everything real can be measured, that some truths must be felt from within the collapse. And maybe that's where science meets its edge and spirituality begins to speak. Because the black hole doesn't just challenge our understanding of physics, it challenges our definition of finality, of death, of disappearance. And what if, instead of being the graveyards of matter, black holes are actually wombs of transformation, not ends, but thresholds, the point where energy sheds its form and returns to its essence? We'll never fly a probe into one and receive data back. We'll never chart the interior of a singularity, but that doesn't mean we haven't already been through one. Because if you've ever had a moment when your life collapsed, when everything you clung to vanished, and you found something deeper on the other side, then you already know. You don't have to understand the physics to feel the portal. You've lived it. And now we walk closer, because the black hole isn't just a mystery in space, it's a mirror, and it's asking you not to run, but to listen to the silence behind all things. And what we'll find next is that the man who gave us light. Nikola Tesla may have understood the dark better than anyone. Let's go there. To the day the light disappeared and something else began. There are moments in history when a single event leaves no explosion, no thunder, no newspaper headline, yet everything changes. For Tesla, one such moment arrived in the silence of his Colorado laboratory. No crowd witnessed it, no camera caught it, but to the man who had spent his life chasing the nature of light, what happened that day would redefine what he believed about reality itself. It wasn't a discovery in the traditional sense. There was no breakthrough formula, no grand unveiling, just a moment when light vanished. He had been working with high voltage currents, generating electric arcs that danced and hummed like living beings. Tesla was not a man content with surface measurements. He listened to the way energy moved, its rhythm, its tone, its behavior under stress. And then, as he adjusted the frequency of one of his resonant circuits, he observed something he had never seen before. The beam of light he was tracking did not bounce back. It did not scatter across the room. It did not even fade. It simply disappeared, as if it had been pulled out of existence by something unseen. Most scientists would have dismissed it. A glitch, a failed reading, an instrument error. But Tesla didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He stood in the silence, watching that spot where the light had been, and whispered something that no textbook would record. It's not gone. It's gone inward. In that moment, he didn't see destruction. He saw design. To him, the disappearance of light wasn't the collapse of energy. It was a transition, a return to the field from which it came. He didn't call it a black hole. That term wouldn't exist for decades, but he understood something far more important. That light is not lost when it leaves form. It's remembered somewhere deeper than any sensor could reach. He later wrote in a notebook few ever read, "I observed the restructuring of light, not into absence, but into origin. It returned to something before shape." This wasn't just the musing of a genius. It was a spiritual recognition wrapped in scientific language. Tesla wasn't simply playing with energy. He was learning from it, noticing how light behaves when it leaves the rules behind. And it wasn't just about photons. It was about the soul. He believed that human beings are also made of structured light, compressed into form, moving through time, vibrating at frequencies too subtle for machines. And just like that beam in his lab, when the time comes, we, too, disappear, not as an end, but as a return. Tesla once said, "You do not die, you return to the field." He saw the collapse of form as a necessary step for light to remember itself beyond identity, and the black hole, in this view, was not a monster, but a midwife, not a destroyer, but a gatekeeper. Because within the gravitational silence, where even time forgets how to move, Tesla felt the pulse of something familiar, the field, the breath behind matter, the intelligence that doesn't think, but knows. And perhaps that's why, when the light disappeared that day, he didn't try to pull it back. He honored it, let it go, and listened. Because real vision isn't just about seeing, it's about being still enough to feel what the universe is whispering when nothing seems to be left. Tesla never published those observations. He knew the world wasn't ready. He once told a journalist, "I could have created a second sun, but humanity was not ready to receive it." Maybe he wasn't talking about electricity. Maybe he was talking about truth, the kind that can't be sold, packaged, or written into equations, the kind you encounter only when everything else collapses. And now, as we stand where Tesla once stood, on the edge of the known and the unknowable, we begin to understand what he felt. Not fear, not failure, but invitation. Because the black hole doesn't erase, it opens. And what it leads to next is something Tesla hinted at, but never fully revealed. A connection far older than science, far wider than space, a portal known in every ancient culture by another name. Let's step into that next, into the myths, the metaphors, the stories our ancestors left us about what lies beyond the light. Long before we had the language of physics, before the words event horizon or gravitational collapse ever existed, we told stories, not to escape reality, but to give shape to what we felt, but couldn't yet explain. Across continents and civilizations, there was always one recurring image, a threshold, a sacred gate, a place between worlds where form ends and something vast begins. The Egyptians called it Duat, a realm the soul travels through after death, guided not by light, but by memory, by balance, by resonance with truth. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there is Bardo, the in-between space where consciousness dissolves and reforms, where illusions die and clarity is earned. The Hindus spoke of Chitakasha, the sky of consciousness, a space so subtle it can only be entered when the ego itself dissolves. The Mayans, the Dogon, the Aboriginal Dreamtime, each held visions of passageways through darkness into deeper light. They were not afraid of the void. They revered it. They knew what we are just beginning to rediscover. That collapse is not an end, but a movement from identity into essence, from name into vibration. And yet, modern minds often resist this. We fear the black hole because we see it as erasure, because we've been taught to value only what we can hold, prove, define. But every ancient myth knew better. They knew that the deepest truths are not static, they're transformational. The serpent sheds its skin, the phoenix burns to ash, the sun sets only to rise again. Black holes were there in every sacred story, just under a different name. Even Christ, in the moment of crucifixion, spoke of descending into death before rising in light, a 3-day passage through darkness into rebirth. Even the stories we no longer call myth carry the same shape: collapse, passage, emergence. Tesla understood this rhythm when he described light vanishing into a point. He wasn't just observing, he was remembering, because in every culture, every ancient cosmology, there's a moment when the soul passes through something it cannot bring language into, a place where words fall away, time loses its grip, and form is no longer relevant. And always, what waits on the other side is not destruction, but clarity. We've seen this mirrored today in modern reports of near-death experiences. People who clinically die often describe the same thing: a tunnel, a darkness, followed not by terror, but by peace, by light, by a feeling of being known, without ever having to explain. Some describe being surrounded by a presence that felt like everything and nothing all at once. Some say they didn't want to return, and when they do come back, they're changed, more compassionate, less afraid. They didn't find proof of God. They found resonance with something so familiar. It broke their heart to realize they had forgotten it. And isn't that what a black hole really is? A space that demands you surrender your form to remember your essence. Tesla knew, long before science had the tools to frame it. He knew that the threshold was not a wall, but a doorway, not an ending, but a question: who are you when there is nothing left to hold? And the answer is not found in theory. It is felt in the silence beyond structure, the place where myth and matter and memory finally converge. Next, we'll step deeper into that convergence, because if light cannot be destroyed, only restructured, then what does that say about us? About death? About grief? About energy that leaves the form, but not the field? Let's enter the next chamber of this mystery where light doesn't vanish. It transforms. We've been taught to fear disappearance. When the light fades, we imagine it lost. When someone dies, we call it the end. When a moment passes, we label it gone. But Tesla knew something deeper, not just intellectually, but through the rhythm of the universe itself. Energy doesn't die. It simply changes form. This isn't just a poetic idea. It's a law. The first law of thermodynamics states, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It only transforms. So why don't we apply that truth to the soul, to love, to grief, to death? Because we've grown up measuring light in lumens, watts, and voltage, forgetting that light also has memory. It holds presence. It carries feeling. Tesla didn't just experiment with currents. He listened to their moods. He once said, "I could hear the singing of light." He believed every beam of sunlight carries not only energy, but a frequency of intention, that the warmth on your skin from a golden sunset is more than heat. It's a vibration designed to heal, to soften, to awaken something ancient in you. So when Tesla saw light pulled into a black hole, he didn't say it was destroyed. He said it was being restructured. He understood that the black hole was not a funeral, but a forge, a place where identity collapses so essence can expand. Think about it. When music ends, the notes fade, but the emotion lingers. The vibration of that sound stays in the body, in the breath, in the memory. When someone you love passes, you no longer see their face. You no longer hear their voice. But somehow, you still feel them, not as an image, but as a presence. That is transformation. That is what Tesla meant when he said, "You are not born. You do not die. You are light, and light doesn't disappear. It returns." He believed we're not physical beings, having brief energetic experiences. We're energetic beings, having a temporary form. Your body is just structured vibration. Your thoughts are currents flowing through a bioelectric field. Your emotions are pulses of resonance, measurable, transferable, and alive. Even sorrow has a frequency. Even joy emits waves. And so, when everything collapses, when you lose the relationship, the job, the identity, what's really falling is the outer shell, the scaffolding. But your light remains. It simply shifts shape. It returns to the field. Tesla often spoke of the unified field long before it became popular in quantum theory. A space beyond space, a frequency behind form. To him, black holes were the evidence that this field exists, that there is a space where energy is not measured, but remembered. So what happens when you walk into a black hole, not in a spaceship, but in your life? What happens when everything familiar disappears? Your role, your direction, your identity. What happens when the light you once radiated goes silent? You think you've ended, but you haven't. You've entered the place of reformation. And just like that beam of light Tesla watched vanish, you're not gone. You're returning, not to the person you were, but to the truth you've always carried underneath. Because the soul is not a spark that fades. It is a frequency that realigns. And the black hole, it's not death. It's a sacred reset, a zero-point field where everything is still possible because everything is now undefined. In the next part, we'll step deeper into what it means to experience this collapse, not just in the stars, but in the human heart, because sometimes the deepest black hole is not in the cosmos, but in us. And when we fall into that silence and stop resisting, something extraordinary happens. We become something new. Not all black holes are found in space. Some exist in kitchens, in hospital waiting rooms, in empty bedrooms at 3 a.m. Some open silently, no flash, no warning, just a slow gravitational pull. As the life you thought you knew starts to come apart, you don't need a telescope to feel that kind of collapse. All it takes is one phone call, one diagnosis, one betrayal, one goodbye that cuts deeper than language. Suddenly, the future goes quiet, the light inside dims, and you find yourself falling not through space, but through meaning. No one else may notice. You may still smile, still show up, still speak, but inside, something is folding in on itself. This is what I call a psychological black hole. The moment when your story, the one you've been writing your whole life, no longer makes sense. The plot has broken. The character you were has disappeared. And all you're left with is the silence between who you were and who you haven't yet become. It's terrifying. But if you stay there long enough, something begins to shift. Because just like cosmic black holes, these internal ones don't exist to punish. They exist to restructure, not your schedule, not your image, but your soul. I remember my own fall. The exact details don't matter, but the feeling, it was like my identity dissolved. The roles I played gone, the goals I clung to dust, even my sense of time fragmented. It wasn't just sadness, it was disintegration. And yet, somewhere deep beneath the fear, there was something else, a strange stillness, a soft pulse, a whisper, stay here, in the dark. Don't try to fix, don't try to flee. Just feel, and so I did. For the first time, I let the collapse complete itself, and in that surrender, I felt something rise, not as a flash of light, but as the beginning of something far more honest, clarity, because when everything falls away, you're finally able to see what was never real to begin with. The identities we wear like armor, the plans we chase to avoid stillness, the beliefs we inherited but never truly believed, all of it goes, and what remains is you, raw, unadorned, uncertain, but strangely free. This is what the black hole offers us, a chance to collapse inward, not into nothingness, but into truth. Tesla understood this, too. He faced ridicule, loss, abandonment by the very institutions that once celebrated him. His ideas were too wide, too subtle, too alive, for a world still obsessed with control. And yet, he didn't stop, because in that silence, in that inner collapse, he touched something deeper than approval. He touched the field, the same one we all carry. So what does this mean for us? It means the next time your life falls apart, the next time your identity dissolves, or your plans implode, or you feel yourself being pulled into a void you can't escape, you're not dying, you're re-entering. And if you can stay long enough in the silence, if you can resist the urge to rebuild too quickly, you'll notice something sacred. You're not falling. You're being gathered, restructured, prepared. For what? For the self you were always meant to remember. Before the noise, before the names, before the world told you who to be. That version of you isn't waiting outside the collapse. It's waiting inside it. And in the next part, we'll explore what happens when you stop resisting that fall, because there's a moment after surrender, after stillness, when the portal opens, and what comes through is not who you were, but who you're becoming. There comes a moment in every collapse when the struggle quiets, not because it's over, but because something inside you, something old and tired, finally lets go. You stop clawing at the walls, stop trying to climb back to what was, stop rehearsing the story of how things should have gone. And in that stillness, the black hole opens, not as destruction, but as invitation. This is the portal Tesla spoke of, not in sermons or scriptures, but in silence. He never claimed to believe. He claimed to know, and what he knew was that beyond resistance, beyond identity, beyond form, there is field, there is light, there is return, but you cannot reach it through willpower. You reach it through surrender. And surrender isn't giving up. It's giving in to something deeper than control. The moment you stop resisting collapse, you begin the real journey, not back to your old self, but into something new, something unshaped, unhurried, undeniably yours. It's like floating, not drowning, like being carried by a force you can't name, but somehow trust. You begin to notice the fear doesn't bite as hard, the grief isn't bottomless, the silence starts to hum. You feel sensations return that have no words, memory without image, knowing without thought. You're no longer falling, you're descending, consciously, curiously, gently. This is what ancient mystics described as the sacred descent, the underworld journey, the womb of unknowing, not punishment, but preparation, like a seed beneath soil, a fetus in the dark, a soul in the chrysalis. And when you stop resisting, you allow the process to do what it was always meant to do, transform you. Tesla didn't fear the void because he understood its pattern. He knew the same energy that creates the stars also calls them inward, to be reborn. In his view, the black hole wasn't chaos. It was geometry, a spiral, a return to origin, so something higher could emerge. And isn't that what happens to us in our own inner voids, when the ego dissolves, when the labels fall away, when we no longer know who we are, but feel more real than we ever have? It's terrifying, yes, but also sacred, because that space, that threshold, that silence, is where light restructures. It's where trauma becomes wisdom, loss becomes clarity, pain becomes permission to finally be honest about who we are. No more pretending, no more proving, just presence. And in that space, something returns, not the person you were, but the soul you had forgotten. And as the inner horizon opens, the one inside your own heart, you realize the black hole never wanted to destroy you. It wanted to strip away the noise so you could hear the music underneath. Tesla didn't enter this space with fear. He entered with awe. And if we're willing to walk the same path, not away from collapse, but into it, we too may discover what he found, a still point. At the center of chaos, a frequency. Beneath identity, a doorway back to the original field. In the final part of this journey, we'll explore what it means to emerge from the other side, to carry that light with us, to become not who we once were, but who we were always meant to be. Because the black hole doesn't end the story. It begins the truest one. There is a silence that doesn't numb, but heals. A darkness that doesn't erase, but refines. And there is a version of you waiting beyond that horizon, who doesn't need to be fixed, only remembered. When Tesla spoke of black holes, he wasn't warning us, he was preparing us. He understood that the universe never wastes energy, that even in collapse, there is design. Even in disappearance, there is direction. So what waits on the other side? Not a new identity, but a deeper integrity, not a louder voice, but a quieter truth. Not a return to who you were, but a homecoming to what you are. You no longer need the stories that once defined you. You no longer cling to the roles that once sustained you. You carry something lighter now, not just knowledge, but clarity, not just ideas, but frequency. This is the rebirth Tesla knew would come for all of us, whether in a lab in Colorado or in a moment of heartbreak. At 2A, me, he never wanted to create just machines. He wanted to help humanity remember the field that flows through everything, through grief, through time, through consciousness itself. And when you emerge from your own black hole, when you've allowed the collapse to run its course, when you've let go of everything that once felt essential, you don't come back. As a survivor, you come back as a transmitter, a carrier of light, subtle, humble, unshakable. The pain is still there, but it no longer defines you. The questions remain, but they no longer cage you. You are not healed in the way the world demands. You are aware, and that changes everything. Tesla once said, to understand the universe, think in terms of frequency, vibration, and energy. Now you do, because you felt it. From the inside, you've become a field that others feel, not through your words, but through your stillness, not through your brilliance, but through your presence. This is the gift. On the other side of collapse, not more answers, but more attunement. And maybe now you understand why the universe wraps its greatest transformations in silence, why it speaks not through thunder, but through thresholds. Black holes were never meant to terrify us. They were meant to teach us how to let go, how to die before we die, so we can finally live. And as you walk forward, changed, quieter, wiser, you realize something else. You're no longer afraid of endings because you've seen what they really are. Not full stops, but commas in a sentence too long to read all at once. Not death, but redirection. Not voids, but portals. And what waits through the next one isn't darkness, it's the return to the light you've carried all along. In the next story, we'll go deeper still, not just through collapse, but into the structure beyond it. Because what lies beyond the black hole is not emptiness, but intelligence, a pattern woven in silence, and it's waiting for you to remember.